Hey everybody, Justin here. Thank you for checking out this video. In this video, I want to share a randomized meal planning spreadsheet that my wife and I came up with. And this is one we used a lot. We actually don't use it that much anymore, but we could switch back to it. And I just wanted to describe it and go from there. Now, you'll see that I named things like randomized dinner planning because at the time we were just using it for dinner. But now we use it, or at the time, after that we used it for more than just dinner, like breakfast, a snack after breakfast, lunch, maybe a snack after lunch, and then for dinner also. But I'd like to take the time in this video to explain how this works. So, first of all, you might be asking, why would you want to randomize your meal planning? Is that like haphazard, or just you have a list of stuff and randomly select? And so, first of all, randomness doesn't necessarily mean kind of haphazard or all over the place. What you're doing is you're putting a structure on how meals are selected, and how you do that is entirely up to you. So it's just like a structure on how it's selected. So for example, you could select some breakfasts randomly, but if you wanted more breakfasts that include yogurt, for example, you can do that. And the randomness provides a lot of variety. It's like variety is the spice of life, right? So it gives some variety, some novelty, and kind of changes things up here and there. So there might be a very good use case for using randomness to select things. We're just sampling from things. And how you sample, and I'll get into all the specifics later, is very important. So, but you could do it completely haphazardly. That would be called like a uniform sampling or simple random sampling. But yeah, let me get into this. So we use this a lot. It really helped out with planning and making lists of ingredients and going to the store and sampling this way, or meal planning this way rather. Now, what we do is there's lots of ways you can sample. So you could again do it completely. Everything has equal probability. Sample that way. But you could also do what's called probability proportional to size. And that way works by using a measure of size. So, for example, if you're studying maybe people's investing strategies, and you have a huge population you can sample from, you might make your measure of size maybe like their income, say if you have a list of income, because kind of logically maybe the person that's making more money has investing strategies you might be interested in. That's not to say we don't want to study anybody that, has a smaller income, but in general, the larger income kind of implies that they're making money and maybe they have interesting investing strategies. That's just an example, okay? Now what we used originally was we used the duration. So for each meal, we would say, this is on average how long it takes to prepare. And so we sampled by 1 divided by the duration, thinking we're more likely to make dinners or lunches that take less time to prepare. Now, as it turned out, we kind of set aside the duration after a while because things were taking roughly the same time, or if a breakfast takes 2 minutes versus 5 minutes, it's not a big deal. We had some lunches were about the same time, roughly 10 minutes. Dinners took significantly longer in many cases. But we didn't find after a while duration super useful. Now you could. It all depends on, this is very, very family or person like specific. So that's what we found out. But we can still sample using this kind of a weight variable, we call it. Okay, and I'll get into all this stuff. But this is what the spreadsheet generally looks like, and I'll show you the exact spreadsheet. You have a section like this. This is just showing it for breakfast, but you would have it for breakfast, for snack, or snack 1, snack 2, for lunch, and for dinner. And it would create a 2-week, it would create your meal planning for 2 weeks. Okay. And you could use this to print out not recipes, well you could, but print out like an ingredient list, that type of thing too. Now it's also important, you see in this example, in week 2, on Wednesday and Thursday, peanut butter jelly sandwich appear in a row for snack 1, the first snack of the day. You might not want that, you know? Or say like, you're sick of hot dogs and on Saturday for week 2, there's hot dog for lunch. Say you don't want that to be selected at all. Okay, so these are what I call constraints. And this is what a lot of meal planner stuff is not working into their system that we have in this system. That you would want to work in constraints to know if for those 2 weeks your constraints are met or not, or you need to regenerate your 2-week meal planning. And the constraints, again, are entirely up to you and your family and they might vary from month to month, or week to week, or even day to day, So you need to incorporate those while still incorporating the randomness and all your other parameters, I'll just call them. Sampling parameters, to be technical. So for example, and I'll get into these later too, you might not want to have the same breakfast appear more than so many times in 2 weeks where that value is, you input that value. You might want to eat out, say at least once every 2 weeks, but no more than, 4 times every 2 weeks. I don't know. I'm just making some stuff up. Maybe you don't want your first and your second snack to be the same snack, during the day. So these are just some example constraints. And if any of those checks fail, you would need to regenerate your 2-week meal planning. But and I'll go through that in detail. But here's an example of, say, some 2 scenarios of 2 weeks that meet these constraints that I had up here. And then here's 2 scenarios that don't meet it. And I put in red the reasons why they don't meet it. First of all, fruit smoothie for week 1 was selected back-to-back for breakfast. Maybe that gets a little monotonous. Crab with dip on Friday for the first week was selected for the first snack of the day and the second snack of the day. In the second scenario, hash browns was selected a lot of times for breakfast for week 1 and also week 2. So that's why these 2 realizations of 2-week meal planning aren't ideal for the scenario that I created. So I have a simulation that I'll show you that you can assess how often you need to refresh your 2-week scenarios. Okay, but we'll get to that. And here's a link. You can download the spreadsheet, change anything you want. This isn't the exact spreadsheet that we used. It's a kind of maybe like a slightly earlier version of it, not as filled out as our final one was. But with all of this, the more familiar with Excel you are, the better. Because then you can change things and do whatever you want. I just ask that if you do use this idea, just attribute Statisticool.com or Justin Smith or something like that, or this web page, whatever. But let me show you the actual spreadsheet, and we'll walk through it. So here's the 2-week scenarios that will be created. But let me show you some inputs. So I'm going to scroll all the way over, and over here we have breakfasts. So what you would do is just list out all the breakfasts that you have eaten before that you want to include in this. You could even include ones that you might not sample now, but you might later. And I can show you how to make it so they're not sampled now. You can list out specific ones. You could list out the name of a restaurant if you go to a restaurant for breakfast. And then I just put them in alphabetical order. In the next, and by the way, the more you can list out, the better, definitely, because you will hit your constraints. You won't fail at those constraints as much. The more stuff you list out. And then I have a column where I list out the ingredients. So yogurt with granola. Well, I need some yogurt and I need some granola. We did these because in our final spreadsheet, we were pulling those columns to make like shopping lists. For example, smoked salmon with cheese. It tells me I need smoked salmon, cheddar or Havarti, Swiss cheese, and maybe I could have put bagel on there too or something. But we were using these for shopping lists, and it worked really well, extremely well. So I just got in the habit of any time I put in a food item, I would put in the ingredients. And you'll see later, I did that even if we went to a restaurant. because the thinking was, say Mexican restaurant for one night got sampled for dinner, but say we ended up not going, then it would still be like, okay, well, we could still use tortillas and some chicken and maybe bell peppers and make our own, chicken tacos or fajitas or something like that, right? So I just got used to putting, whenever I put in a food item, I put the ingredients. Duration is a column, and it's totally okay to have estimates here of how many minutes it takes to prepare something. So you can see for hard-boiled eggs, it takes a long time. Maybe French toast takes a while. Yogurt is super easy. Yogurt and granola takes just maybe, 30 seconds or one more minute, Because we were sampling using durations at one time. Now again, it turned out that we found durations for us anyway were not that important. It could be for you. So I kept durations here. I think it's good to know how long it takes to make something. The effort involved, okay? This weight column is what in this spreadsheet is being sampled from. The weight column, when they're all equal like this, when it's all one, the probability of selections are all the same. So this is like rolling a dice right now, okay? It's going, or flipping a 24-sided dice, and whichever lands on, that's the meal you'll have for breakfast, or plan to have, I should say. But say you have hard-boiled eggs, and then I don't know, you get an egg allergy or something. So now you don't want anything with egg. What you would do is just put a 0 here, and now this item will never be selected. It has 0 chance of being selected. And because all the probabilities have to add up to 100%, the other probabilities for the other food items adjust accordingly. Okay, so you put a 0 there. That's how you exclude items from being selected. Now, say you really want eggs to be selected. You and maybe your, kids, or they're just craving eggs, So instead of a 1, maybe we make that a 3 or something. And again, that probability increases, the other ones decrease accordingly, so it still adds up to 100%. So that's how you can increase the probability of things being selected. You're increasing the chance of it being selected. Say you really want Pop-Tarts to be selected, maybe make that a 5, Now, it doesn't mean it will be. You're still kind of at the mercy of probability, but in your planning, that's taken into account by increasing the probability of selection. So that's how you can use those weights. So I'm just going to make these all a 1 again. And so you have 14 days and 2 weeks, and so you need 14 random numbers here. And then it just says, okay, let's look at this. The random number is 0.385. You go in this area here, and 0.385 falls in this interval, which corresponds to French toast. So that's why French toast is up here. Okay, and so you do that for, this does it automatically for all 14 selections. It makes the selections. It pulls off the ingredient list, which again, we weren't really using in this spreadsheet, but one just slightly later. And that's breakfast. Now, similarly, we do that for the snack. Now, we have 2 snacks throughout the day, but we're just pulling them from the same snack list. You could actually have 2 snack lists, but we just have it from the same snack list. But everything else is the same exact idea. The ingredients, the duration it takes to make that snack, a weight column, and the selections. Now, there's 28 selections because we do 2 snacks a day. So 14 days and 2 weeks times 2 snacks per day, 28 snacks in 2 weeks. Similarly for lunch, and similarly, you predicted it, for dinner. Okay, and you can see for our durations, there were some that took a lot, like this bistec and cebollada, the steak and onions, that took a lot of time to get the meat tender and stuff. Other ones, like a grilled steak, I just throw it on the grill, marinate it real quick, throw it on the grill, and it's 15 minutes and it's done. So, durations, I think they are useful. They could be incorporated into this weight column. But we found that when we use durations, it didn't really seem to matter for us anyway. So, okay, so that's the inputs, kind of all your food items. I like to have the ingredients, the durations, and how often kind of you want to select these on average or randomly. Those are the inputs. Now, some other inputs are this constraints, and this part is very important. And again, this will depend on you and your family, your desires, different types of food, how often you want to see something, or if how often you don't want to see something. If you want to see a certain item, how often you want to go out to eat or not, so it all depends on your specifics. In this example, and these were ones we pretty much used in our final spreadsheet, I have the yellows are inputs, right? The yellow cells. But, if breakfast appears more than 3 times in 2 weeks, that got kind of monotonous for us. Like if we're having English muffins 3 times in 2 weeks, we're like, we're tired of that, Similarly with snack 1, lunch, snack 2, and dinner, if they appear more than so many times in 2 weeks, that, we weren't really digging that. If the same breakfast appears 2 or more days in a row, so we have some constraints for things that appear in a row, that especially was kind of monotonous. So we didn't want that to happen more than, 2 or more days in a row. We didn't want anything to occur in a row. Now you might not care about that. So you might take these constraints out. Or you might say, if I have a club sandwich for lunch 2 days in a row, that's fine. But if it's 3 days, I don't want that. So you can edit this constraint to make it so. Now again, it helps if you're familiar with Excel, right? We wanted to eat out every 2 weeks. We wanted it at least 1 time, but no more than 4. That's just too much. So, and you might not want to eat out at all. Or maybe you want to eat out in 2 weeks, you want to eat out 6 times. So you might change that. You can change any of these you want, add constraints, subtract constraints, whatever. But you can see here that snack 1 and snack 2 are the same for any day. That has been hit, so we need to refresh our 2-week selection. So for example, if we look at these here, I can see apple is here for week 2 on Tuesday, and apple is there for snack 2. So it's the same snack, which you might not mind at all, but we wanted those to be different for some variety. So I would need to press F9, and that refreshes random numbers in Excel. So I just press F9. And now you see even more constraints are hit there. Press it again. A lot of them are there. Now I'm going to press it until there are none there. It might take a little while. And so you might ask yourself, how many times do I need to press the F9 button before my 2 weeks are good and there's no constraints that are hit? Okay, so far it's taken almost 20 times. There we go. So no constraints are hit, so these 2 weeks are good. I can go to print it out. I can just select this area to be printed, and that's it. But again, we saw it took about 20 presses for me to find a good 2 weeks. So I have this simulation over here. You can enter the amount of iterations. I'm just going to I'll put 1,000. It'll go by really fast. I'll put 1,000. Actually, let me do 5,000 or 10,000 so I can talk while it's going. And what it will do is it will generate these 2 weeks. It'll do that 10,000 times. And it'll keep track of the number of bad ones and the number of good ones. And the percent of time there was a good 2 weeks that were created. And so you can essentially just, flip that. And so you can get 1 good 2 weeks every so many refreshes of the random numbers. I know that's convoluted, but all it's going through is it's doing this 10,000 times, and it'll tell you how often you need to refresh the numbers before you get a good 2-week meal plan that satisfies all of your constraints. So let me just go ahead. I'm going to press Control M, and you'll see the iterations start from 1 and go to 10,000, and these things will just be updated in real time. And all this stuff will flash by on the screen. So let me just go ahead and do that. And you can see it's pretty fast. This is doing this behind the scenes, creating a big columns of 1s and 0s, like when it fails and when it doesn't fail. And so we can see with this very specific list of foods and constraints, how often I would need to press refresh to get a good 2 weeks. See, it's already about halfway through right now. And you can see it looks like it's around maybe one good list every 23 or 24 presses of the button. Not terrible. Wouldn't take you too long to create these 2 weeks. It's almost done, about 9,000 iterations. As the probabilities start to converge. So about 24 times. So on average, it could happen after one press, it could happen after 50 presses, but on average, every 24 presses of the button, I'll get a good 2-week meal plan. Satisfies all our constraints, and we're good to go. Go to the store, you have your list, you can buy the ingredients for 2 weeks, or if you want to do 1 week at a time, you could theoretically, if you know Excel, you could copy this idea for a whole month, Let me go into how I do some of these constraints. So over to the right, I actually tackle how I go about knowing that these constraints were hit or not. So for example, breakfast appears more than X times in 2 weeks. So what I do is I go over to the right here, and I'm just counting the frequencies of how many times breakfasts appear. So for example, here I have yogurt with granola. What I do is I search for yogurt with granola in this whole list, and I see it appears at the top, and then it appears here too. Okay, and this for this day. So that's why this cell that I'm in right here says 2. It's just counting how many times yogurt with granola appears in that list. And so I can do that for the first snack, second snack, lunch, and dinner. So that's how I do this constraint. If these appear more than so many times. And then I just compare this count to the inputted count. All right. The same breakfast 2 or more days in a row. I do that like this. I'll show you. I just call it like a duplicate check. So I'm comparing, like, say, the first breakfast to the second breakfast. If they're the same, I put a 1. Otherwise, it's a 0. And then I go down to the next day, and I compare that breakfast to the previous one, And then I just add them up. Add up those indicators. And if that's, greater than 0, that means that some breakfast has appeared more than once in a row. So that's how I do these kind of 2 or more days in a row indicators. Snack 1 and snack 2 the same for every day. For that constraint, for that one, what I do is I'm simply taking, I just compare snack 1 to snack 2 for that day. If it's the same, then I put a 1. If it's not, it's a 0. And then again, I just add those up over all the days, okay, to see if for any day if that occurred. Okay, so that's how I do those type of constraints. And you can think of a lot of constraints. I mean, you could say, on Saturday or Sunday, I don't want to eat any pork or something, right? You could put that in there. And you would just have to know which of your recipes contain pork. And then say, okay, if pork was selected for any of these days, then that fails the constraint or satisfies the constraint, whatever the wording is, it fails for your 2-week selections. What we can also do is say I don't care how many times things appear. I don't care if this appears 13 times, all these, and these ones, these 2 days in a row thing, I don't care about, so I'm just gonna delete these entirely. Okay. Now I'm going to simulate again. So what do you think is going to happen? Now we have less strict constraints. So we should get one good 2-week selection more frequently than every 24 button presses. So I'm going to simulate again, but with less constraints, and we'll see how this changes. It should decrease from 24. So let me go ahead and do that. So we made it so if breakfast, lunch, snacks, dinner appear more than 2 times in a row, we don't care. They can appear up to 13 times in a row. And then these 2 days in a row type of stuff, the first one was so many times in 2-week time, time period. But as far as stuff in a row, we don't care about anymore. So we could get the same snacks in a row, dinners in a row, lunches in a row, and we don't care about it. So, and that might be true for you. Like, like for me, I could probably eat spaghetti like 3 or 4 days in a row. I'm not going to get tired of it. You can see we're at about 8,000 iterations. And yeah, the probability, the one good 2-week realization is occurring about every 6 or 7 button presses. So you can see with less constraints, when we relax the constraints, we get, intuitively, it makes sense, we get more frequently created good 2-week meal plans. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to share this. Again, feel free to edit things as you need for you and your family. Enter in your foods, the probability of selecting certain foods or not selecting. You can create whatever constraints you can think of. You're only limited by your imagination there. And again, they can change week to week or month to month, or people get allergies or they get cravings for certain things, or they get sick of certain foods. You can edit things as needed. So I just wanted to share that. And again, it's how you can do randomized meal planning quite simply, and make it so randomness just puts a structure on things. So it doesn't have to be all haphazard, okay? And it's very straightforward to do, and very quickly too. It doesn't take the longest. The things that take the longest are just putting all of your meals into the spreadsheet, and then thinking about what constraints you want to see in the 2-week meal plans. But again, if you go to this website, my website, statisticool.com/mathstat/dinners, and then go scroll down, this spreadsheet that I just showed is available here for free. You can check it out. And that's all I got. So I definitely appreciate you checking out this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.